Jesus loves the little children, but so does Satan. So much so that in the Old Testament, they fed children to false gods to fill the belly of Satan. For the next few moments, I would like to talk to you about Murder, She Wrote. We will focus on the overlooked systemic racism of abortion by those who claim to be woke. We will talk about planted in the hood parenthood. Margaret Sanger and the church. Murder, She Wrote was an American crime drama television series starring Angela Lansbury, who played Jessica Fletcher as mystery writer and amateur detective. The series aired for 12 seasons and 264 episodes from 1984 to 1996 on CBS Network. It was followed by 4 TV films. Among the most successful long-running television shows in history, it averaged more than 30 million viewers per week in its prime. The show mostly starts with a preview of the episode's events, with Jessica stating, "Tonight on Murder, She Wrote." Jessica invariably proves more perceptive than the official investigators of a case, who are almost always willing to erase the most likely suspect. By carefully piecing the clues together and asking astute questions, she fools the authorities into arresting her chosen suspect as the real murderer. Murder occurred with such regularity in her vicinity that the term Cabot Cove Syndrome was coined to describe the constant appearance of dead bodies in remote locations. Indeed, if Cabot Cove existed in real life, it would top the FBI's national crime statistics, and in numerous categories, with some analysis suggesting that the homicide rate in Cabot Cove exceeds even that of the real-life murder capital of the world. Whereas Murder, She Wrote was a fictional drama depicting heinous crimes, today we have a real-life Murder, She Wrote. A saga that was etched out by the hands and ingenuity of Margaret Sanger. Proverbs 6:16 through 19 sheds light on God's view of sins that eat away at God. In the NIV version, it says, there are 6 things the Lord hates. 7 are detestable to him. Number 1, haughty eyes. That's prideful. A lying tongue. Hands that shed innocent blood. Abortion. A heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. 2 Samuel 21:1, the NIV version says, during the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, it is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death. In this passage, God's response to Saul for killing the Gibeonites after Israel had made an agreement to keep the Gibeonites alive is the result of a famine. And today, America is battling a spiritual famine due to the bloodshed of the over 62 million babies that have been lynched in the womb in our country. We are in a famine. The reason why common sense has become uncommon in government is because we're in a famine. The steady increase of smash and grabs in this state is the result of being in a famine. The indoctrination of our children in schools is the result of being in a famine. Who would have ever thought that our children would be taught to call people by pronouns and what they self-identify as a means of being tolerant? This too is the result of the bloodshed and the famine that we are in. And let's not talk about critical race theory. We're now teaching kids in schools that white people are inherently racist. It's the Jim Crow era in reverse. Blacks are attempting to do to whites what was once done to them. Let me get it right this morning. Listen, it was wrong during the Jim Crow era, and it's wrong for you to label someone inherently racist today. And we're seeing these ideologies creep into the church, so much so that wicked and timid and weak-kneed pastors are adopting these things as biblical lenses. Listen, these things are not in the scripture, so they have no room in the church. When Saul killed the Gibeonites wrongfully, God sent a famine for 3 years. And as a result of 2,363 babies being aborted every day in our country, God has allowed a pandemic and a tyrannical void to come upon this nation. And it has ruled us for the past 3 years. God is speaking, but are we listening? Before they make God's Not Dead Part 5, let me go ahead and remind you today that God is not dead. Our God is not dead. Our God is not asleep. Our God is not somewhere gone where he cannot act or move. No, our God is on the throne until his enemies be made his footstool. You know, I'm reminded of how the baby in the womb of Elizabeth, which was John the Baptist, when he came in contact with Mary, and Mary was carrying Jesus. I'm reminded of when they came together. What did John the Baptist do in the womb of Elizabeth? He leaped. Can I get at least 1,000 people in here just to stand up and just leap one time? Just leap. Just leap. Now somebody may say, why is he doing it? No, we're leaping for life. We're leaping for truth. We're leaping because Jesus made John leap in the womb. So much for Justice Sotomayor, who says that a baby can't feel pain in the womb. If John the Baptist could leap because of joy, we can stand for the unborn. And guess what? What happened after John the Baptist leaped in Elizabeth's womb? Listen, she was filled with the Holy Ghost. And let me tell you, church is going to take the Spirit of God in order for us to stand in a day like today. But we must call sin what it is. Calling abortion health care is like putting lipstick on a pig. You can put lipstick on a pig, dress it up, put some perfume, put some cologne on it, I don't know, shave it, whatever you want to do. Plait the hair on the pig, whatever, give it a pigtail. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a pig. And you can find whatever euphemistic way to dress up abortion. It is the murdering of the unborn. Isaiah 5:20 says, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light, and light for darkness, and put bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. There was a story about a famous astronomer by the name of Sir Percival Lowell. Sir Percival Lowell believed that there was life on Mars. He believed it so much that many of his comrades began to believe the same thing. In 1877, Lowell heard that an Italian astronomer had seen straight lines crisscrossing the Martian surface. Lowell spent the rest of his years squinting into the eyepiece of his giant telescope in Arizona, mapping the channels and canals he saw. He was convinced the canals were proof of intelligent life on Mars, possibly an older but wiser race than humanity. Lowell's observation gained wide acceptance. So eminent was he, none dared to contradict him. Now, of course, things are different. Space probes have orbited Mars and landed on its surface. The entire planet has been mapped, and no one has seen a canal. How could Lowell have seen so much that was not there? They set out to find out why, and they came up with two things. Number one, he saw canals on Mars because he wanted to see canals on Mars. When you are deceived, you will see what you want to see. Number two, we know that he suffered from a rare eye disease that made him see the blood vessels in his own eyes, which is where we get the syndrome called Lowell's syndrome. And those who believe that a baby in the womb is just a clump of cells, they are deceived. Deceived willfully, and they're willfully on their way to destruction. 2 Timothy 3:13 says, evildoers and impostors will go from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. Colossians 2:8 says, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. Our country has become the epicenter for deception. In a letter to C.J. Gamble, Margaret Sanger wrote out a plan of deception, steeped in racism, and how she would eliminate the black population. Margaret Sanger said, and I quote, the minister's work is also important and also should be trained, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the black minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Well, today I'm a rebellious Negro who doesn't mind standing for life and standing for the unborn. For years, Planned Parenthood defended Margaret Sanger, claiming that any suggestion she was a racist was simply untrue. They contended that Sanger's associations with eugenicists were just that, associations, but she did not hold to their beliefs. However, in a surprise move in the summer of 2020, Planned Parenthood of Greater New York removed Sanger's name from the flagship clinic in Manhattan, citing her racist legacy. A short time later, the organization's leadership admitted their detractors had been right about Sanger all along. Deception. The difficult truth is this, that Margaret Sanger's racist alliances and belief in eugenics have caused damage to the health and lives of black people, of all people, indigenous people, people of color, people with disabilities, immigrants, and many others. Her alignment with the eugenics movement rooted in white supremacy is in direct opposition to our mission and belief that all people should have the right to determine their own future and decide, without coercion or judgment, whether and when to have children. These are the words of Planned Parenthood. And how has the black minister responded to the plan of Margaret Sanger? For the most part, many of our black ministers and ministers in general are guilty of blood being on their hands because they have overlooked the sin of abortion through ignorance, or they have become a sounding board for the furtherance of all things abortion. On January 22 of this year, Raphael Warnock, and I can't call him a reverend, he said, as a pro-choice pastor, I've always believed that a patient's room is way too small for a woman, her doctor, and the United States government. A pro-choice pastor. The last time I checked, when my wife gave life to my 3 children, when the baby is delivered, nearly 15 to 20 people come in the room. And there's room and space for a lot of people. The thing is, Raphael Warnock, the truth is there's no space for you in Christendom as a minister. Because you, my friend, are a heretic. 10 years before the advent of the Negro Project, Sanger opened an abortion clinic in Harlem, New York, precisely because of the city's large African-American population. Poverty was a serious problem, and Sanger did everything she could to convince the community that birth control, including abortion, was a solution for their predicament. Sanger shrewdly used the influence of prominent blacks to reach the masses with this message. She invited Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the nation's most influential African Americans, one of the founders of the NAACP, an organization that will not talk about the sanctity of life, I might add, and a host of Harlem's leading blacks, including physicians, social workers, ministers, and journalists, to form an advisory council to help direct the clinic so that our work in birth control will be a constructive force in the community. It was a setup. She knew the importance of having black professionals on the advisory board and in the clinic. She knew blacks would instinctively suspect whites of wanting to decrease their numbers. She would later use this knowledge to implement the Negro Project. Sanger convinced the community so well that Harlem's largest black church, the Abyssinian Baptist Church, held a mass meeting featuring Sanger as the speaker. In the same manner that Margaret Sanger used prominent blacks to deceive their own community into accepting abortion, our current president has used the same tactics. You remember when our president insulted black America by saying, if you are still trying to figure out if you're going to vote for Donald Trump or me, then you ain't black. Why is it when blacks decide not to go along with liberalism, we have to have our skin color questioned? Everyone else can vote and choose the options that's out there, but for the black man or the black woman, we have to vote one way. That's a tactic straight out of the book of Margaret Sanger. And it gets worse. Just a few days ago, Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer announced his retirement. And our president has come out and said that he was going to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. I have 3 things to say about this. Number 1, the criteria for being appointed to the Supreme Court should not be based upon color or sex. It should be based upon merit and merit only. Number 2, if our president makes good on his plan to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court, it will not be based upon how wise she is, but how woke she is. Number 3, The only reason why it's politically expedient for our president to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court at such a time as this is because he desires to have another puppet on the Supreme Court as they engage upon the Dobbs versus Jackson ruling that shall take place in June of this year. We already have someone who's black on the Supreme Court, but he believes in the sanctity of life. But instead, Joe Biden wants someone who can buttress Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and stand against his ideals as they spew nonsense and ignorance. What I'm saying is not popular, but someone has to speak up. In closing, the question today is, how do we get rid of the stain of bloodshed that is upon our nation? And how do we get rid of this famine that we're in? The answer is in 2 Chronicles 7 and 14. If my people, which are called by my name, would humble themselves and pray, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal the land. Listen, our hope is in Jesus. Let me say that again. Our hope is in Jesus. Let me say it over here. Our hope is in. Who is our hope in? Who is our hope in? Who is our hope in? And although many preachers don't talk about it today as they should, he's coming back. No man knoweth the day nor the hour that the Son of God shall appear. But when he comes back, there's going to be a sound of a trumpet. And we that are alive and remain shall be caught up to meet him in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Whatever you do, don't stop fighting. Whatever you do, don't stop contending for the faith. To all the activists and all of the leaders, all of the pastors, all of the laborers who go to the abortion clinics every week praying and hoping for this thing to change, do not lose fight. Continue to stand strong, because our God is on the way.